Hi, this is Heather Widener of Hue Bijou for the 2015 ICEResin design team. In today's project, I'm going to show you how to take basic acrylic paint and incorporate it into your resin to create a marbled or feathery effect. I would like to note right from the beginning that this project is not limited to a jewelry scale project. I'm working within a bezel, but you can also take this technique and work on a much larger scale simply by pouring large sheets of resin and incorporating the paint, thereby creating a product that you can use in mixed media work, with bookbinding, lots of different projects. The theme for today's piece is the heat of summer, and so I looked to pictures I've taken of recent travels to very hot places and chose to find a way to incorporate the palette that stuck in my head, which was basically the colors of fiery summer, reds, oranges, yellows, those kinds of things. The materials for today's project include a nonstick work surface, ICEResin, mixing cups and stir sticks, bamboo skewers, acrylic paints in your choice of colors, a palette for distributing the paints, an open back bezel, clear packing tape, and a straw for eliminating bubbles later in the process. First thing you need to do is seal the back of your open back bezel with the clear packing tape. Burnish the edges tightly so that the resin does not leak out when you pour it into the bezel. Mix a small batch of ICEResin and pour it into the bezel, filling the bezel half full or maybe just a little bit past half full. You do not need to fill the bezel up all the way at this point in the process. Immediately after pouring the first layer into the bezel, go ahead and start applying your colors. You're just going to put a little bit of the acrylic paint onto one of the skewers and use the other skewer to push it into the top of the resin, and then use the two sticks to gently pull it apart and stretch it across the width of the bezel. Continue adding the additional colors that you want, as much or as little as you want, into your bezel. The lines do not need to be perfect, they don't need to be parallel, they don't need to be touching. You just keep adding the colors as you see fit. Now comes the really fun part. Take one of the bamboo skewers and with the sharp pointy tip, move it through the paint and the resin, swirling and feathering the colors into a design that pleases you. Take care not to overmix your colors, as you don't want to end up with a big, blotchy, indistinct mess. You're trying to keep some of the fine detail of the paint feathering and marbling through the resin. Let that layer of paint and resin set up for a few hours. When the resin has set up more firmly and the paint is settled into the resin, you can go ahead and mix another batch of ICEResin and apply the final doming layer to your first layer. My resin was quite chilly when I mixed it up, so I ended up with a lot of very fine bubbles. And to get rid of the bubbles, I'm just going to blow gently directly onto the resin with a drinking straw. Let that top layer of resin set overnight and then remove the piece from the packing tape. The project I've just demonstrated to you, I've only used one layer of paint. If you would like to add a second layer of paint, just let your first layer set up and then pour another layer of resin in, not as a doming layer, but just as a second layer, and repeat the process with the paint in that second layer. I'm showing you here what effect that has on your project. The bezel on the left has 2 layers of paint in it, and the bezel on the right is the one that I had demonstrated that only has 1 layer of paint. So you can see what happens when you add additional layers. Whether you prefer the more open look of a single layer of paint or the full look of additional layers of paint is purely up to you. Personally, I like being able to see the feathering and the detail and effects of the single layer of paint, but you can do as many or as few as you like. One other thing I wanted to show you is just related to finishing. In the top bezel in this image, I've simply removed the packing tape and left the bezel as is. On the bottom bezel in this image, I removed the packing tape, sanded the back of the piece with a fairly rough sandpaper to remove any unevenness and stickiness from the tape, and then I've applied another thin layer of resin to the back to seal the back and also to bring it to full transparency once again. If you added another layer of resin to create a beautiful dome on the back, you could actually have a reversible pendant that you could wear in either direction, which is a nice added bonus. I hope you've enjoyed this project, and for more information about ICEResin, including tutorials and frequently asked questions, go to ICEResin.com. For more information about my work, you can find me at hughbijou.com and gemfabulous.com. Thanks, and have a great day.